This is my worldview presentation. It's about world travel using Google Maps. It's something that I do quite a bit. If I happen to be reading a book about a certain part of the world and I'm curious about what it actually looks like, sometimes I'll use Google Maps to drill right down to the street level and sort of walk around on the streets. Also now, before I travel someplace, I almost always look at the area on Google Maps before I set off. Google Maps was not always with us. It was released in 2005 and it absorbed several other technologies, and including the real-time traffic analyzer. And it has been continually evolving, and it continues to continually evolve. Like, for instance, I used to be able to get down right on the street level and see one of the houses I lived in, but now they took all those little streets away. They're only doing major streets, which is probably for security concerns, but it's too bad because I really liked it when they had all the data available. They also had 45-degree aerial imagery for a long time, and you could still access it so that you could get a side view of any given set of buildings or road or whatever, and they've taken that away too. For a while they had indoor maps. If somebody recorded the inside of their store, for instance, you could actually walk into the store and see it. But they've taken a lot of that functionality away. Still, it's very, very useful. They get their maps from several major satellite map producing agencies. And that too changes somewhat consistently, and it's spotty. For instance, you can't see so much in areas like Russia, for instance. New York is well documented, and you can get down on the streets there pretty clearly. As you can see where the arrow is pointing, that's who the source of that particular map is. And in that case, I think there's about 4 or 5 different sources that they're cobbling together to use. Whereas if you go to Kazakhstan, you're not going to see quite as much. You won't ever see the little blue line that's on the roads, where if you click on that line, you can get down on the street and look around you. Still is interesting. So in Russia, they use Airbus imagery, which I can't remember who owns Airbus, but I don't think it's Russia. But still, this is satellite imagery, so people have access to it, and Google leases it and uses it. So I want to focus on NJIT because that's where we are, and you'll be able to relate to this. The first thing I often do is put on satellite view, because although some people like the street view where everything is more abstracted and you can see the street names more clearly, I prefer real objects, real buildings. That's just what I happen to relate to. So then I start to zoom in. Here I'm zooming in onto our home, which none of us are at right now. And then if you click in the lower right-hand corner, there's a little person. It turns on the street view, and that's how you get the blue lines. Once you get those blue lines, you can then click anywhere on one of those blue lines. It'll bring you to that area, and you can look around and see what's around you, including whatever happened to be going on at the point that the Google camera went through, which is always very interesting. And why am I showing this slide? There it is. I just wanted to show it to you a little more. It's the little person in the lower right-hand corner. And then the dots. If you happen to see a dot, that's where somebody has taken a picture and uploaded it. It used to be that anybody could take pictures and upload dots so you could see the insides of some people's office buildings just sort of as a joke. But now they're more controlled, and unfortunately in the case of the wellness and event centers, it's more like publicity type photos on how cool the new wellness center is. And then 45-degree angle, you used to be able to get with control and mouse or by going to street view and then like panning out somewhat. I'm afraid they've taken this away. Maybe they'll bring it back again. It changes constantly. Okay, so once you click on the blue line for street view, you get whatever Google happened to take a picture of on the day that they were doing it. So I just wandered around campus a bit here, clicking different arrows, which brings you down different streets. And this is the type of thing you see. And it will give the time that this photograph was taken also. I think this is 2015. So if you think you know these people, you probably don't. And sometimes there's weird after images, of course. So what I use Google Maps for intensively before I travel is to look at a hotel before I book a room there, because I used to just use hotels.com and go by price, and I would end up in areas that were difficult to access and hard to find. And instead now I look at the hotel, make sure it's easy to get to, whether or not it looks good, and then I'll book the hotel. You can plan travel routes, of course, and when I went to Yakima, Washington a little while ago, I planned all the various drives that we did before we undertook them. You can look at a tourist stop before you go to it to make sure it's worth going to. And even if you can't get out and go to these places, you can still use Google Maps to wander around and to see them, which is a wonderful thing for people who can't get out. So here's scouting hotels. I got a really good one in Yakima, which even though it was more expensive than the other ones around, I knew it was in the center of town, and it ended up definitely being worth it because I was able to walk out and go to farmers markets and, you know, the comic book store and all sorts of other good things, which if we had stayed in a different hotel further away, we wouldn't have gone to. So this is what it looked like before I got there. I looked at it carefully. And, okay. This is the map that I used to plan the travel routes when we were driving through the desert, because you don't want to spend 8 hours just driving through desert. You want to make sure eventually you're going to hit a town with some sort of convenience store, which didn't work out so well. Even though it looks like there might be convenience stores on that map, there really aren't very many. So there's many, many reasons to use Google Maps. I'm sure you do already. You can see how and where people live, figure out complex driving routes, understand different neighborhoods, look up things in the news like where something happened if you want to see the actual location, and many, many more possibilities. This one here, this is, I always get lost leaving Newark Airport coming back to where I live now. And yet this is the map, and I have to say, it hasn't helped me much. I also, if I'm exploring a place, like I was reading books about Greenville lately, I got down on the street and I looked at all the pictures, and then I just took screen captures of some of them so that I could then use them as a screensaver on my computer, which gives you a wider variety of pictures to use as screensavers.